The tickets are $1,950 each, my mother said, her voice light, as if she were discussing a lunch salad and not money. If you can't afford it, stay in Dallas. I nodded. No argument. No sigh. No asking why I'm always the one being measured by my wallet. 3 hours later, just 15 minutes into a nap after a 14-hour shift, my phone buzzed. Bank alert. My credit card had been charged nearly $8,000. First-class airfare. I scrolled down to see the passenger names: Barbara Monroe, Leonard Monroe, Ashley Monroe, Todd Monroe. No Rachel. No me. Welcome to Family Ashes. A channel for those who once believed family was a place to return to until they realized it was a one-sided contract called obligation. If you've spent your youth giving everything to people who say, you're the strong one, so you can handle a bit more, at what point do you realize you're just the one paying the bills? And if today is the day you stop, do you have the courage to reclaim yourself? If you've ever been taken advantage of in the name of unconditional love, leave a comment below. And don't forget to follow Family Ashes, where the truth is told through tears, but no longer through silence. I'm Rachel Monroe, 34 years old, living in Dallas, Texas. I work as a paramedic. Nobody chooses this job because it's easy or because the uniform looks nice. I work 60 to 70 hours a week on average, often through nights, holidays, and through that state of being where your body no longer distinguishes between tired, hungry, or numb. Each month, after rent, bills, and sending a chunk toward my lingering student loans, $18,000 hanging over me like a quiet noose, I'm left with just enough to live. Not extra. Not happiness. Just enough. There are 4 others in my family. My mother, Barbara, is the kind of woman who claims to have sacrificed everything for her children but never lets me forget that I'm the responsible one, so I should know better. Her voice is sweet, like honey being poured into your ear, but underneath is a logic hard as stone. If I'm the stable one, then I must also carry the ones who aren't. My father, Leonard, never says anything. He stands behind every decision my mother makes, neither agreeing nor objecting. The kind of silence that tells you he won't stand up for you if it risks upsetting someone else. My sister, Ashley, studied accounting then dropped out when she had a kid. Now she stays home, with no income, no plan, but an expensive taste and a spending habit built on "we'll figure it out." She says money is her husband's job, and hers is to maintain emotional stability for the family. Her husband, Todd, has tried to start 2 businesses. Both failed. Now he stays home, does a little vague freelance work, and spends most of his time complaining that the world isn't fair to people with big dreams. Next week, my entire family will be going on a 6-day vacation to New York. They've booked 4-star hotels, first-class flights, and chose the exact week I'm scheduled for 3 consecutive night shifts at the emergency station. No one asked if I wanted to go. They just called to tell me how much the tickets cost. I had just stepped out of the ambulance as the sky began to dim. Sweat had soaked through to the inner layer of my uniform, and the scent of disinfectant still clung to my palms. It had been a 14-hour shift, no lunch break, barely a sip of water, and my brain could no longer distinguish whether I was walking or simply drifting through the city on autopilot. I had just entered my apartment, not even had the chance to take off my shoes, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with one word: Mom. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. On the other end, my mother didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I was just getting off a shift, if I was tired, if I had eaten. She simply said, in her usual breezy tone, if you can't afford it, don't go. First-class tickets are over $1,900 each. It's not a small thing. I stood frozen in the kitchen, eyes on the floor, shoes still on. Whether from exhaustion or familiarity, I could only respond, I understand. It took exactly 3 hours for me to understand something else. While I was sitting on the sofa, my phone buzzed again. Bank alert. I opened it, my heart not even racing, partly because I was so used to it by now, partly because I no longer had the energy to worry. My credit card had been charged $7,860. The note said, first-class airfare, 4 passengers. I scrolled to check the names: Barbara Monroe, Leonard Monroe, Ashley Monroe. Todd Monroe. Not me. No one called beforehand. No one asked. Not a single message seeking permission. They had simply used my card like it was a built-in responsibility. I stared at the screen in silence. My heart didn't race, and no tears came. Just a quiet emptiness began to spread, cold and steady, like I had just walked into an old room and realized I was never truly seen as a person there. I didn't take long to react. The moment I finished reading the bank alert, I opened the app and tapped on each charge. Plane ticket. Taxes. First-class upgrade fees. Each time I hit dispute felt like snipping a bloodline I had offered them over the past 10 years. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Finally, I hit lock account. The screen flashed, "Your account has been temporarily deactivated." I stared at it, disturbingly calm. Something inside me had stopped breathing, but not out of fear. Because I had finally stopped trying to be the agreeable daughter. I stood still in the kitchen, chilled by silence, the air still thick with the sterile smell from the hospital. Then the phone lit up again. A message from Ashley, arriving just as the family was checking in at the airport. "Why hasn't it been paid? The tickets aren't confirmed yet." No greeting, no concern, no hint of acknowledgement that I might have feelings too. Just a line of cold accusation, metallic in tone. I read the message 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I was trying to find even a trace of familial care in those words. There wasn't any. I typed back, word by word, hearing my mother's voice like an old recording I'd memorized by heart. "You said it yourself, if I can't afford it, I should stay home." I hit send. No emotion. No explanation. No apology. Then I stood up, walked over to my desk, and opened my laptop. My fingers typed into the search bar, "Arizona Forest Cabin Solo Retreat." I didn't think much. I picked a small wooden cabin nestled beside a pine forest, no room service, no cable TV, just the sound of wind and the scent of fresh pine. 6 days, 5 nights. The exact duration my family would be in New York. I chose to pay with a secondary credit card, one from an account they didn't know about. Each step was done in silence, not with relief, not with excitement, just a cold, clear lightness, like peeling off a heavy, soaking wet coat I had worn for too long. After I booked it, I turned off my phone. Not on airplane mode. Not passively waiting for them to call. I powered it off completely. For the first time in years, I chose to disappear, not because I was angry with them, but because I was done being angry with myself for putting up with it for so long. I wasn't staying home, but I wasn't there either. I was in the only place where I knew I wouldn't be expected to give anything, in the center of my own decision. And I knew they might be furious. But I also knew, I had just done the bravest thing in my life. I said no, and this time, I wasn't coming back. I lay stretched out on the bed in the tiny cabin, the phone still off, only the ceiling fan creaking overhead and a warm yellow glow from the old desk lamp beside me. In the middle of the pines, everything seemed to slow down. No car horns, no notifications buzzing like static. But inside my head, memories reeled like a film on rewind. The old wounds began to ache, not because I wanted to remember, but because my body had never really forgotten. I remembered that spring, when Todd lost his job for the second time, something about an investor backing out, or so he said. They came to me on a Tuesday evening, my mother worried, Ashley teary-eyed, like I was the only bank still open after 8 p.m. It's just temporary, to help Todd get back on his feet. I pulled $2,400 from my emergency savings, the fund I'd set aside for dental work and new tires, and transferred it to them. Todd didn't say thank you. He only nodded, like I had finally returned a debt he believed I owed him from some forgotten lifetime. Then came my father. He had a hypertension episode and was rushed to the hospital. The stay and medication cost $1,200, and insurance didn't cover all of it. My mom called me, soft as ever, like she was placing a coffee order. "Dad needs a bit of help. You're the only one who can get it done in time." I wired the money that same night and went back to work the next morning. No one ever brought it up again. Not even a "thank you, sweetie." It was as if the whole thing had never happened, as if my help was as assumed as tap water and electricity. Then there was the used car I bought for Ashley when she needed to drive her kid to school. I couldn't afford a new one, but I tried. I found a reliable pre-owned car and financed it under my name. By the third month, the car broke down. Ashley called, demanding I pay for the repairs. I said no, I didn't have anything extra left. And for the first time, I heard her say clearly over the phone, "You really are selfish." I remembered the night I had a high fever, collapsed on my sofa for nearly 3 days straight, no appetite, no strength to even reach for water. I texted my mom, "I'm feeling really weak. If you're free, could you bring me some soup?" She responded 3 hours later, "I'm watching the kids for Ashley today. She has a nail appointment. You understand, right?" I did. I had understood for a long time. I understood that in this family, my worth was tied directly to the money I could provide. When I couldn't open my wallet, I didn't matter. The wounds didn't come from dollar amounts. They came from the way they labeled love without ever offering a single drop of concern in return. And here, in this cold wooden cabin tucked inside a forest, I finally saw it clearly. What they owed me wasn't just money. They owed me a moment of listening. A single, honest, human question, "Are you okay?" And maybe, they never will ask. I spent that entire morning in the cabin writing the email. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what each word I was about to send would break, something I had long pretended was bond. Every line in the attached spreadsheet was a slice, not made with a knife, but with years of cutting myself smaller to fit the definition of the good daughter. When I hit send, I didn't feel light, the way people often say they do. There was no instant sense of release. Just a steady heartbeat and a slight tremble in my hand. I stared at the screen, fully aware that I had just dismantled a system that had quietly governed my entire life, a system I had silently upheld, never asked to, but was always expected to. Not long after, my phone buzzed. Though on silent, the screen lit up. The first message was from my mother. "You've torn this family apart." Just one sentence. No question why, no mention of the numbers, no denial of what I listed, but no acknowledgement either. She didn't challenge the facts. She simply condemned the act. In her eyes, I wasn't wrong for being taken advantage of, I was wrong for finally speaking up. I read the message once, twice, then pressed my lips together as if swallowing something lodged in my throat. I had known she would say that. I'd already imagined her voice, slow, laced with just enough pain to sound wounded, but packed with far more control. My mother always used the idea of family like a rope, not to tie us together, but to pull me back each time I took a step away. The second message came from my father. "We didn't raise you to humiliate us like this." I closed my eyes. That was almost the only thing he'd said to me this year. One single sentence, not when I paid his hospital bill, not when I helped him register for insurance online because he didn't know how, not even when I drove across town in the rain to deliver his flu meds. But when I dared to account for what I'd given, then he spoke. I don't know if he meant humiliate because I dared to send an invoice, or because I forced him to face the fact that he had never once protected me, from my mother, from my sister, from the family's default assumption that I would always be the support beam. Maybe both. Maybe, to him, his role as father ended the moment I could earn my own paycheck. From then on, he became a spectator, silent when I was in pain, but unable to tolerate it when I pushed back. The last message was from Ashley. "It's just a misunderstanding. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I let out a laugh, not because it was funny, but because I was tired. Misunderstanding? She didn't ask what I thought was misunderstood. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She was trying to file it all away as a minor disagreement over dinner, something that could be patched up with a few jokes, a fake hug, a casual sister's coffee outing. But I knew better. This wasn't once. This was 2 years. 5 years. A lifetime of shouldering expectations set by people who thought love meant silently enduring. I sat there for a long time, the screen of my phone lighting up and dimming again, missed notifications blinking like voices in my head from years ago. She always has a job, she's stable. Unmarried daughters should think more about their parents. She's strong, she can handle it. Yes. I had endured. For far too long. Long enough for them to believe I would always endure it, even as it slowly drained me from the inside. I didn't reply to any of the messages. I simply closed the laptop, stood up, and stepped out onto the cabin porch. The sun was beginning to set. The light spilled over the red earth, and everything seemed to move in slow motion. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for disappointing someone. I didn't feel ashamed for hurting my family. Instead, I felt sad, not because I had done something too big, but because I had waited too long to do something absolutely necessary. This wasn't betrayal. This was the first act of honesty I'd allowed myself to live fully. And I knew, from that moment on, every definition of family they had used to keep me tethered would no longer be able to hold me. I was making tea when the familiar ding of Messenger broke the silence. The phone was on silent mode, resting on the windowsill, but the screen lit up with a name that made me pause, Melissa Green. It took me a few seconds to place it, Melissa, Todd's ex-girlfriend. They broke up about 2 years ago, after she moved to another state to work at a major law firm in Minneapolis. Since then, I hadn't heard her name again. No one in the family spoke of Melissa anymore, as if she had never existed. But now, here she was, messaging me, just as everything in my family was hanging in the air like a house without a foundation. I tapped the message, feeling something heavy settle in the middle of my chest. Hi Rachel. Sorry to reach out like this. But I was going through some old financial records and found a few things that might concern you. I'm not sure if you already know. But I think you should. Attached was a PDF file, no subject line, just the name account transactions _ Monroe _ 2022. I didn't open it right away. I looked out the window, a cooling mug of tea in my hand. For a moment, I didn't want to know anything else. I was too tired of things I should know, and truths no one ever said out loud. But something instinctual, something sharpened from years of being dismissed, used like a bottomless wallet, told me I had to open it. If only to confirm that, this time, I wasn't imagining things. I sat down at the table and opened the file. The first page was a transaction list, unfamiliar purchases, but the username was crystal clear, Todd Monroe. Right below it, authorized user, primary account holder, Rachel Monroe. I scrolled quickly. The charges lined up like a carefully structured web of lies: crypto investments, sports betting transactions, anonymous e-wallet transfers, ATM withdrawals near local casinos. All of them fell between July and December of last year, right when I had to cancel my holiday plans because I couldn't afford my student loan payment. Every transaction was a slap to my memory. I remembered Todd coming to my apartment in August, asking to borrow a few $100s for gas and car repairs because the bank was having system issues. I gave it to him. I remembered how he said, "Thanks, Rachel. Honestly, I hate asking you for help," I smiled at him. I thought maybe I was helping a man who was trying. I scrolled to the bottom of the file. The final pages were printed emails, from my mother. Melissa. Please don't tell Rachel. She's already stressed about her student loans. If she finds out about this, everything will spiral. Let us handle it. Right below that was an email from my father. We have it under control. Todd is just being impulsive. Rachel doesn't need to know. I didn't feel my blood rush to my face the way it usually did. I felt cold. A chill that started in my palms, crept up my arms, and settled in the back of my neck. The kind of cold that betrayal stops being a shock and starts becoming a fact of life. I had grown used to being used. But I had never imagined they would hide this from me to protect the person stealing from a card under my name, without a single word of permission. It took me nearly an hour to steady myself. Not to calm my anger, but to keep from unraveling. I reopened the old email, the declaration of war I had sent a week earlier. I added a new line to the spreadsheet: unauthorized use of secondary card, $3,650. I attached the file Melissa had sent. Then I wrote, attached as proof of unauthorized use of a secondary credit card in my name by Todd Monroe. This occurred between July and December of last year. I was never consulted or asked for consent. Total debt owed now exceeds $15,000. I want to be clear, all financial support from me will cease completely and permanently from this moment on. I didn't stop there. This time, I opened the CC field and typed in 2 more names. Martha Green, my aunt, my mother's sister, the only one in the family who once stood up for me during a family meeting last year, only to be brushed off with, "You don't understand the situation." And HR@willowtrustbank.com, the human resources department where my father worked as a financial supervisor. I didn't need to warn them there would be consequences. They knew. They had known all along. And they had chosen silence. I was no longer the child they could lull into silence with the word family. I was no longer the pillar they leaned on when the winds blew, only to call it shared burden. I was the one made responsible for every bill no one else wanted to sign, and today, I sign my name onto the truth, not to demand justice, but to walk away with clarity. I hit send. And as the email left my outbox, I knew. I had just shattered the silence they built from years of complicity. And this time, I wasn't going to apologize for it. I was folding a pile of freshly washed laundry when I heard a knock on the door. Not the kind of polite tap people use when visiting. It was the kind of knock my mother always used, firm, impatient, like whatever she had to say was more important than my right to privacy. I knew it was her. Something in the rhythm of her knuckles always made me feel like I had done something wrong, even when all I was doing was living my life. I looked through the peephole. My mother and father were standing outside my apartment door. My mother wore a white blouse with a rounded collar, the kind she usually picked for serious family meetings or social gatherings. My father was dressed in a button-down shirt, tie, and polished leather shoes, like he'd just come from the office, or was on his way to a board meeting. They weren't holding flowers. No apology. Just cold faces and a thin folder in my mother's hand, probably documents they'd used to explain things. I opened the door. My mother didn't wait for me to invite her in, didn't ask how I was. She looked straight at me, eyes tense but her expression coated in that familiar softness, like a mother teaching her daughter a moral lesson. Her voice was low, deliberate, and lined with reproach masquerading as care. "This doesn't need to be such a big deal, sweetheart." I looked at her for a few seconds, saying nothing. I saw the creases around her mouth, not from age, but from years of using a gentle smile to control people. I took a deep breath. Part of me was still waiting for her to say the one thing I had never heard from her: "I'm sorry. We were wrong." But she didn't. My mother had never admitted fault, not to me, anyway. I lifted my head. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a glow on her cheek. I kept my tone slow, not cold, but not soft either. If love only exists when I open my wallet, it's not love. That's dependence. And if this family only sees me as a daughter when I can pay the bills, then maybe it's time I stop being your daughter. My father stepped forward, face flushed. He was usually quiet, but when he did speak, it was always as if he were delivering the voice of the entire family. "You're turning your back on us, Rachel." His voice was firm, not loud, but heavy enough to thicken the air like a thunderstorm hanging just before it breaks. I looked at him, the man who sat silently when I paid his hospital bills. The man who never once asked if I was managing, who simply nodded whenever my mother said, "She can handle it." I stood up straight, heart beating as steady as a ticking clock in a quiet kitchen. Not fast, not shaky, not out of rhythm. I replied, "No. I'm not turning my back on this family. I'm just done letting people step on me and call it love." I said each word like it had been pulled from the very center of my chest. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, just the truth. And truth, when spoken after years of being buried, carries a weight that doesn't need to be shouted. My mother turned to my father, as if searching for backup. Then she looked back at me, this time with eyes that had lost their confidence. You can't tear down the foundation of a family over a few misunderstandings. I gave a small smile. One with no joy behind it. Mom, if that foundation only stands when I grit my teeth and suffer in silence, maybe it should have collapsed a long time ago. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I didn't give her the chance. I raised my hand to the door handle, slowly, not in anger. I lifted my head and looked her in the eyes. I'm still your daughter. But I'm no longer the obedient shadow you created. I closed the door. Not slammed. No dramatics. Just closed it. Clean. Final. I didn't press my ear to the door like I used to. I didn't need to know if they were crying, or angry, or still standing there. I had spent too many years living in reaction to them. But this time, I didn't need to anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I stepped out of the role of the good daughter without asking anyone's permission. And that, for me, was a true goodbye. No farewell. No promise to come back. I started therapy the next Monday morning, the very week after I closed that final door. The therapist's office was about 3 blocks from my apartment, on the second floor of an old building with thick glass windows and the scent of aged wood. I sat on a gray upholstered chair in the waiting room, holding the intake form. When I reached the line asking, reason for seeking therapy, I hesitated. I didn't know what to write. Because I'm tired? Because I've been silent too long? I wrote one short sentence. I want to learn how to live without feeling like I owe everyone something. That was all. The first few sessions brought no tears. I didn't cry. I told my story. Told it evenly, as though I were narrating someone else's life. But the more I told it, the more I began to hear my own voice, the voice I had lost somewhere between all the apologies, the money requests, and the looks that told me I didn't have the right to be tired. I changed jobs too. No more 14-hour shifts. No more eating dinner at 3 a.m. in the hospital supply closet. I took a part-time position in a lighter recovery unit. Less pay, more consistency. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night to emergency calls. I started learning how to sleep through the night, something I thought only other people got to do. During my final shift before transferring jobs, I met Ben. He was an anesthesiology tech, quiet, soft-spoken, and above all, he listened. Not the nodding kind. Not the let me tell you about my own version kind. He simply sat there, made eye contact, and was fully present. We had lunch together in the hospital cafeteria, cold takeout, weak iced tea, and a conversation with no agenda. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I was just me, and that was enough. A month passed in a strange kind of stillness. No angry emails. No midnight calls. I hadn't received any apology from my family. But one Saturday morning, when I checked the mailbox outside my apartment, I found a cream-colored envelope, no return address, no postmark. Inside was a check, $7,870. No note. No message. No handwriting. Just a number, like the way they always used money to replace words, to replace affection, to replace the truth. I sat with that check for nearly an hour. Not angry. Not overjoyed. Just quiet. They hadn't sent an apology, because in their minds, they probably still believed I was the one at fault for breaking the emotional ecosystem they had built. I give, they take, and we all call it love. I didn't throw the check away. I didn't cash it either. A week later, I delivered it to a scholarship fund for single women studying to become nurses, women like me, just younger, softer, who maybe still believe that if they try just a little harder, love will come. I hoped that money would help someone avoid bleeding themselves dry just to keep others from walking away. For the first time in my life, I did something big without asking anyone's permission. And I knew that morning was the first time I truly lived. Not because I had earned my freedom, but because I chose it myself, with hands that no longer trembled. I used to believe that silence was how you protected everything: peace, dignity, grown-up pride, the appearance of harmony. I used to think love meant endurance, that swallowing pain was how you showed devotion, that if I didn't speak up, the people around me would feel it and adjust. But they didn't. They adapted, to me paying without being asked. To me stepping back without complaint. To me patching up my own life while they praised our stability. And through all those years, I called my silence love. Until I realized, silence is not love. Silence is complicity. It's how I enabled an imbalance that quietly devoured me from within. It's the unspoken agreement that made them believe I never tired, never hurt, never needed anything but duty. Now, I am no longer someone they can assume. I'm no longer the dependable one. I'm a 34-year-old woman still learning how to protect her boundaries, still making mistakes, still soft on rainy nights, but I've learned that stepping back isn't failure. And saying no doesn't mean I lack love. It means I love in the right way, to the right people, and this time, that includes me. I'm not waiting for them to understand. I'm not holding out for an apology. I don't need them to admit I was right. Because I no longer live to prove anything. I live to breathe. To step out of the shadow of kindness taken for granted. And to walk into a life where love isn't something I have to purchase with other people's bills. It took me nearly 30 years to understand this. If family only exists when you're the one sacrificing, it's not love, it's control. You can forgive. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the ground others walk on. What about you? Have you ever stayed silent to keep the peace, only to realize that silence was killing you piece by piece? Have you ever carried your entire family on your back, only to be the one person never allowed to be tired? If the answer is yes, leave a comment. Share the moment you chose to stand up, even if it was with the smallest no. Because someone out there might need your story to step out of their own quiet suffering. And don't forget to follow Family Ashes, where we don't sugarcoat family, but accept that real love begins with truth. Even if it hurts. Even if it's late. But it's real. And it's enough.